In this tutorial, I will show you how to play Resident Evil Outbreak File 1 and File 2 via Emulator. First, we will learn how to set up everything. After that, I will show you how to connect to the official fan server and how to build your own local server. After that is done, I will show you how to make your local server public via global IP address or Hamachi. I will focus on PCSX2 Emulator QT version and cut some parts of the video to make it as straightforward as possible. There will be chapter timecodes, so if you don't need a full guide, you can jump to the information you need. Okay, so let's get started with the steps we must do and the steps which are optional but give a better gaming experience. Here is a list of that things. I already downloaded and unpacked everything, but will show you each source except ISO and BIOS files. These steps are not complicated, but some of them are time consuming, so what can go wrong? First, I would recommend that you create a folder where you can store everything you need. After that, you can download the latest version of the PCSX2 emulator. At the time I made this video, it was version 2.0.2, but every version with a QT written in the exe file works. There are two different downloads on the site, one in form of an installer and one as a packed file. Here you can choose the way you prefer. I use the packed file since the results are the same and we also need to unpack some of the other required files. After you install the emulator, you get a little tutorial where you can set up the paths to your BIOS files, games, and memory cards. You also can change them afterwards in the emulator settings. And just like that, the first step is done. As next step, we need to get the original Japanese ISO files for Resident Evil Outbreak File 1 and File 2, the BIOS file, and the pre-configured memory card. Also, I show you optional translation patches, since the games are Japanese and you probably want to patch them to English versions. Again, unfortunately, I can tell you where to find the ISO and BIOS files, and I would also advise you to look for tutorials on how the ISO and BIOS files can legally be dumped. You wouldn't harm a company by illegally downloading and copying a car, right? At the time of the video, the pirate copy market was so bad that the first results I found with a quick Google search were download sites for the games and the BIOS. Of course, I ignored them and legally dumped my games and BIOS files, and this is what I also recommend you. So the next step is to get a pre-configured memory card and the translation patches. I will link this video in the description. Here you can download the links for both. Also, it's one of two persons who inspired me to do this tutorial. Both of these files are packed, so you need to unpack them again, which I already did. The patches will be unpacked as a folder and the memory card as a single file. Now our list gets a bit shorter and we can start patching the games, so most of it will be in English. Inside your patches folder are two Delta files, which are the patches for both of the games. Place your legally obtained file 1 and 2 ISOs here. Now navigate to the Delta Patcher subfolder and start the exe. Here we have to choose the ISO and the patch file, and after that click Apply Patch. It takes a little time and will give you a short message after the patching is done. In the meantime, we can register to the official Outbreak Fanserver at obsrv.org, which will also be linked in the description. Here you have to agree to the terms and validate your email address. If you don't have an email address, I would recommend you to create a free one at outlook.com. For later parts of the tutorial, the email address will also be needed. Now, after the first patch is done, we do the same for file 2. The procedure stays the same as for file 1. But of course, we have to choose the file 2 ISO and Delta file. I tried to start the emulator while the patch was loading and it crashed the emulator, which you can see here. So maybe wait for a moment until the second patch is done. After the patching is done, you can move the patched games to your preferred folder, which in my case is the games folder I created inside my PCSX2 folder. You can also delete the patches folder afterwards if you like, since we don't need it anymore. And just like that, our list got shorter again. The next step is to start and set up the emulator. I already did this, but I will show you each setting. We will also emulate a PS2 keyboard, so in-game chat is easy since you don't need to type with your controller. But first we will use the pre-configured memory card we downloaded earlier. If you didn't already create a folder for your memory card, I would recommend to create one inside your PCSX2 folder and place your memory card here. If there already is a memory card, you can overwrite. Next, create a folder to place your legally obtained BIOS and ISO files. Place the files and afterwards start the emulator, so you can check if all paths are correct. In a moment, I will open the emulator settings so you can see where you can check the paths. First, click Settings, followed by Interface. After that, click Game List and check here if it matches the path where you placed your legally obtained ISO files. Click BIOS afterwards and check here if it matches the path where you placed your legally obtained BIOS file. If you got more than one legally obtained BIOS, choose the USA one. In my case, it is version SCPH39001, but any USA BIOS should work. You can also choose another legally obtained BIOS if you like, but then you probably will be stuck loading if you want to play online. I also changed Turbo to 500% since we will be using it a bit while we test the game. Next, we check if the path for our memory card is correct. Click and enable network and HDD. We will need it later. The next step is to configure our controller and to emulate a PS2 keyboard. To do this, click Settings again and then Controller. After that, click port 1 and choose your controller in the top left corner. Auto mapping normally does the job, but you can also map each button as you like by clicking it. To emulate a PS2 keyboard, just click on USB port 1 and choose your keyboard and let auto mapping do the job again. Our list got shorter again and we can now activate Obsrv online fan servers and test the game. To do this, we need the official IP which we can find at obsrv.org under the wiki section. Here we click on IP switch and copy the official IP. At the time I did this video, it was 208.72.237.31. Now we must activate network connection for both games and set the IP we just copied. To do this, right-click File 1 from your game list and choose Properties. Here we have to choose Network and HDD again. I also beefed up some settings to make the game look better and run smoother. You can pause at emulation and graphics if you want to copy the settings. Also check again if the path for the memory card is correct. At Network and HDD, enable Ethernet, choose Sockets as device type and Auto as Ethernet device. Choose Manual at DNS1 address and paste the IP here. File 1 is now connected to the official fan server, and you need to do the same with File 2, which I didn't do in this video. So now we start File 1 and see if it worked and if we can connect to the server in-game. Also, we are shorten our list again a bit. If you want to fast forward, you can press Tab and use the 500% turbo boost. In-game, navigate to Network Play and press Circle. Next window you press Circle again and choose Yes to load the net file of your memory card. After that, previous connection and then Next. The next screen is a bit glitched, but that's normal. Press Circle again after a couple of seconds. If you get sent back after the glitch screen, you most likely didn't choose the American BIOS. And now we log in with our account we just registered at obsrv.org. For this, we use the emulated keyboard and type the name and password we choose. If you stay signed up, you can auto log in the future on the right-hand side. After a quick load time, you can choose the lobby you like and join or create a game. You can see here that some games are already open. So let's go a bit down to not disturb anyone with the testing. Start the lobby and test the game. Everything works fine, which ends this chapter. As next step, we will build our own local server and make it public afterwards. The pros here are that the open source server can be preserved by you if Sony has a bad day and exterminate the fan server. Also with a good ping like 10 to 30 megs, it can help you with the so-called teleporting enemy glitch. This occurs if a desync happens through a high ping or low PC performance. The cons are that only chosen friends of you may join your game and there will be no statistics logged, unlike if you play at the official fan server. To build your own server, you need to download VirtualBox and a preconfigured OVA file. This brings me to the second person who inspired this video. This will also be linked in the description and you can find both download links here. After you install VirtualBox, just double-click the OVA file, choose the name for your server and the path where you want to install it. I had to change the setting in my BIOS to make it work and can't remember which one it was. But VirtualBox will show you at start if something still has to be done, so you can write it down and do so. After a minute, the installation is completed and we can start our virtual machine, which contains both servers for file 1 and 2. The first start of the VM will take a bit time, but we will later make it autosave state, so we don't have to change anything afterwards. So now we double click and let it boot the first time. This is a emulated Raspberry Pi, which will be important later when we install Hamachi on it. The machine has started now and you can see that both servers are already running. What we have to do now is to change the current IP to your VM IP and restart both servers. To do so, we close both terminal windows and open the terminal to the top left. There we type ifconfig, not ipconfig. ipconfig works only for Windows machines. The IP to the top left is your virtual machine. Mark and copy this IP. Sadly, Ctrl+C doesn't work inside the terminal, so we have to right-click and copy manually. After that, we open the file 1 and 2 config.sh files and the local DNS config.sh file. Here we can change all the current IPs with our local VM's IP and save the changes. Let's see how often I fail doing it. This was the first time. Now we go back to the emulator settings and change the file 1 official fan server IP to our local IP. Right-click file 1 again, properties, and change the DNS1 IP at network and HDD. After we did all the changes, double-click the restart local DNS sh file and execute. Also execute in terminal just to be sure. Now double-click the execute file and one server sh files in terminal. If all went right, the IP is switched to your VM's IP. Double-check the emulator settings and start file 1 again. The login process is now very similar to the one we already did, but at the login screen we have to create a new account. You can do this by typing in your name and password to the right. After that, the server saves your login files and you type them to the left in future logins. The good thing is that you can make a one-letter account with a one-letter password and it's fine. So my account is called 1 and you can guess the password. Now we log in and will be granted with many Japanese letters. We can ignore them, navigate to the bottom right box and press circle. After that, we give ourselves a handle name that will be shown as our in-game name. Now finish this by clicking here, and this time it is the left box we have to press circle. You can see that our server is interacting with us on the left side while we open and test the game. In-game, we can see our handle name at the loading screen, and the server works fine. At this point, if another PC is logged in your local network, it will also be able to join your game. It is also possible to play multiple instances of the PCSX2 emulator on one PC and connect them to the server simultaneously. The next step is to make our local server public. The first way is using your global IP. Also, you must port forward the TCP ports 443, 8200, 8300, 8590, and 8690. If you have access to your router, you can log in and forward the ports. If a range is asked, enter the port's number at both ends. Also, you can find your global IP in your router settings, or you can Google what's my global IP. If you are not able to port forward, you can use Hamachi, which I will show you after this chapter. We also have to change the DNS1 IP in our emulator to 192.0.2.1, which I will do now. Additionally, we must copy some URLs and paste them into our file 1 and 2 internal DNS section. You can find it at network and HDD next to the intercept DHCP section. To get the URLs, we visit the Obsrv wiki again and click on alternate DNS setups on the left side. Now we copy and paste the URLs and change the top two IPs to our global IP, which I didn't do in this video since it's just an example. Also make sure that the last entry gate 1 got the IP 153.121.44.150 and check every activate box. You now have to change all the IPs in your virtual machine to your global IP, restart the DNS, and open the server again like we did before. I also didn't do it in this video, but we'll do it in our next step, which is installing Hamachi. So why Hamachi? The problem with the global IP method is that you have to forward your ports, and most providers change your global IP every 24 hours. It is pretty annoying to do the changes to your server and emulator every time, and Hamachi is a workaround for that. You can easily create a virtual network with up to 5 friends to play LAN games, or in our case, make our Windows PC and our virtual machine join the same network. After that, up to 3 friends can join that network. So first, we have to download and install Hamachi on both systems. For our Windows system, we get a handy installer. You can find it at vpn.org, which I will also link in the description. We also need an email address and sign up to use the program. Your virtual machine emulates a Raspberry Pi, which uses a Linux operating system. That means we have to use terminal commands here to do the installation and to join our network afterwards. I will copy that command lines in the description of the video. And don't be scared, we only have to do this once and there's not much you can do wrong. Since the command lines are pretty long, I did copy them in a text file and will send that text file to myself via email. I did this while I installed Hamachi on Windows and it took me longer than I'd like to admit, so there's a little cut. Here you can open a web browser inside your virtual machine. I ended up sending myself only the command lines since I couldn't open the text file. Copy them in a text file inside your virtual machine and save it. After that, we switch back to our Windows system, finish the installation of Hamachi, and start it afterwards. If you accidentally close a browser window like I did here, you can normally reopen it by holding Ctrl and Shift and pressing T. We will now log into Hamachi with our email and set up a room with a password. We can ignore and close this error message. You can see here that we already received a static Hamachi IP. If you didn't already create a free Hamachi account with your email, you should do this by clicking Sign Up. Otherwise, you can proceed. After the login, we create the room. I will call this one Obsrv test 1, and as password I set 1. Actually, I fail a couple of times until I get it right. We will later make our virtual machine join the room via this command line. Click Create, and the setup for Windows is now completed. We will now switch back to our virtual machine to install Hamachi there and join our room afterwards. To do this, open the text file we created earlier, and after that, the terminal to execute the command lines. I looked up a guide for the installation, and I think some of the command lines are unnecessary. But I left them in so you can see that you can really not do anything wrong. Copy each command line one by one and press Enter after each command line. This command line lets you download Hamachi. You need to check if it matches the download URL of their website. To do this, click at the Linux section on their website and check if every single thing of the URL matches. If not, copy that URL and override it in your command line. Same goes for the next command line. We now have installed Hamachi on our virtual machine and will join the room of our Windows machine with the next command lines. Before doing that, I will redo some of the command lines so you can see nothing really can go wrong. If you want to skip that, you can jump to the next chapter for the login. This command line will let you log into Hamachi. Set the nickname of your virtual machine with this command line. With this command line, we join the room we created on our Windows machine. You need to press space after the room name and type in the password to the room. You can see here that our virtual machine entered the room and our two systems are now connected via Hamachi. The last command line will let Hamachi auto start in the future. We can now close the terminal and delete our text file and change the IPs of a virtual machine and emulator one last time. Remember, all the IPs in your virtual machine have to be replaced with the new Hamachi IP you can see here. Also execute restart DNS and execute in terminal again before opening file 1 and file 2 server for good. After that, we will never have to change it again, since we let our virtual machine autosave state in the future, which I will show you later. But first, I change all the necessary IPs and test both games. You can see that both servers now got the new Hamachi IP. Now we switch back to our emulator and change the IPs here to our virtual machine's Hamachi IP. Remember that the DNS1 and Gate1 IPs remain unchanged and that the boxes for internal DNS entries are checked. If you don't have any entries here, jump back to the chapter Internal DNS or Where is my CLR dev9 ini file. Only the top two IPs of your entries have to be changed to your Hamachi IP. If you want to play with your friends, they have to exactly copy your emulator settings and join your Hamachi room. Now let's start file 1 again. Our server remembers our login, so we use the username we created earlier. You can see that our server now interacts with our Hamachi IP, which is what we wanted. The game runs fine again and we can close it again. Next, we copy our IP settings to file 2, which I cut in the video, but at this point I assume you know how it's done. Let's start file 2 and see if it works. Since it's the first time I started file 2 in this video, we have to create a new account. The procedure is similar to file 1 and the server will save our login again. You can see that our file 2 server interacts with our Hamachi IP like our file 1 server did before. The game works fine again and I get mauled to death. So now that we made sure both games work, we make our virtual machine autosave state when closed, so we never have to redo anything. To do so, we need this command line and change the name inside the quotation marks to our virtual machine's name. I will also write down the command line in the description. Next, we open up our Windows command prompt as admin. We now have to navigate to the folder where VirtualBox got installed and execute the command line there. If you didn't change the path, it should match mine and you can just do the same steps to navigate there. If not, navigate to the path where you installed VirtualBox. If you don't receive any error message after the command line is executed, it worked. After closing your virtual machine one time, every future session of this virtual machine won't ask you when closing and will automatically save state. It takes about half a minute after starting your virtual machine until Hamachi automatically reconnects. I did all of this again to be sure and cut that part of the video. If we look up our list, only one point is left, and that is installing file 1 and 2 on a virtual HDD. This step is completely optional, but I would recommend it since it has an easy setup which only takes a bit time to install. It's not complicated and you will have much faster load times. If you think about how often you get loading times between doors, it saves you a lot of lifetime. Also, if you switch to another PCSX2 version, you can use the path of your virtual HDD and will never have to do it again. For the setup, we first need the HD loader L file. To get it, we visit the Obsrv wiki again, click faster loading on the left side and then PCSX2-HDD. Here we click HD loader version 0.8c and unpack the L file. Next step is to create a virtual HDD file. To do this, we open our emulator settings and click Network and HDD. Here we check if the path to the virtual HDD is like we want and click Create Image. This will create a sparse file which will look like it's 40 GB big, but in reality it's only as big as the games we install on it. You can check your storage after creating the file and will see that nothing changed. Next step is to start the HD loader L file. To do this, we click System, then Start File, and then we open our L file. Don't worry about the German language here, since I'm German, as you probably noticed from my emotional pronunciation and my excellent sense of humor. Click Install to the right side. We have to insert our file 1 or 2 ISO file now. To do so, click System, change Disk from File, and pick File 1. The HD loader didn't recognize it on my first try, so I did it again. Now enter a random name and click on the second box from the bottom right to start the installation. I was a bit confused because the box contents were translated space, end, delete and cancel. Sadly, this will take some time and I can't guarantee that the emulator turbo boost won't corrupt the virtual HDD. So use it at your own risk. You also have to do the same steps for file 2. I will cut this part and change the HDD path to my virtual HDD, which already stores both games. We now have to enable HDD for both games and start them afterwards. One last installation for both games is required to unlock HDD load times. Click HDD install and you will have another installation setup which finishes a lot faster this time. After that, you can go inside options to switch between HDD and DVD mode. If you play DVD or HDD and the host uses the other system, the game will let you change, so you don't have to restart the whole login. This ends our optional HDD chapter. So, let's summarize the last time what can go wrong. First, you should always double and triple check all paths and command lines. A typo can happen really fast. Second, if you get sent back to the menu while logging in, you most likely didn't choose the American BIOS. Third, if you get stuck at 40% load times, you probably got a typo in the IP and didn't activate the internal DNS URLs or change DNS1 or Gate1 IPs. Fourth, if Hamachi's download and install command lines don't work, check their site again and compare the URLs. Fifth, your ping and PC performance will affect if the enemies will teleport. Better PC performance and a good ping will reduce teleporting a lot. You will never experience teleporting enemies if you are in a room alone. If 2 or more players are in the same area or room, the first player who enters the room will be synced with the enemies and they won't teleport on his screen. So if you experience much lag and nothing helps, you can share your screen via Discord and stick together so you can always watch the screen of the first person in the room. But now enough of that, and to our last point. Have fun playing these two games the way you like. Also, I delete everything I did because I already did this multiple times and doesn't need this one anymore. Bye bye.